What I'm basically trying to say is that I don't think it's unreasonable to claim that sports are the singular thing that humanity as a whole treasures most. And think about it. They are consistently the most viewed events in the world, across every country. They produce the most popular people on the planet. They generate the most fierce emotions, both for good and for bad. They almost bankrupted one of the most powerful companies on the planet. And they are by far the largest sector of the entertainment industry. I mean, what even comes close? Maybe music? Religion? I don't know. The more I think about it, the more confident I am that humanity as a whole loves sports over anything else. That's tangible, of course, not like love, family, freedom, but even then it's tough to call. But why am I saying all this? What does this have to do with there being three sports? Well, I just think that despite the chokehold that sports have over our species, I find that we have a relatively poor understanding about what sports actually are. You would think, or at least I would, that by now sports would have become a rigorous academic discipline which is eagerly studied at universities by nerdy little students, in the same way that music, or film, or literature, or theology, or anything else that humanity is infatuated by is. But it isn't. And yes, you can study derivatives of sport at university, like sports science, but this focuses more on, well, the science of sport. So diet, nutrition, the biomechanics of exercise and training programs, this sort of thing. Then you could also make the claim for coaches. They dive into every minute detail on how to succeed at any given sport. But again, they only specialize in a single sport. And then the last category of sports study would probably be pundits and podcast bros and data bros all over the world that spend hours debating endlessly about who the GOAT is and diving into every data point imaginable. And this is all very good, all very useful, but no one studies just sport itself as a general interdisciplinary field. And hopefully this comes across as patronising, because I would honestly be surprised if anyone could actually tell me what the definition for sport even is. Now, I'm very curious myself as to what a sports degree might entail and what topics could be covered. So I guess that's what I'm setting out to do, making this the introductory lecture, and which would in turn make you my students. And you know you're in for an absolute treat when you're being lectured by someone who has absolutely no idea what they were talking about. But to be honest, that's most things nowadays, so you just have to deal with it. So now that I've definitely sold you on everything, let's actually cut to the chase a little bit. So, there are three types of sports. Those are turn-based sports, coactive sports, and interactive sports. Now, turn-based sports are sports in which competitors perform their actions sequentially, without direct interference or influence from opponents. Example sports would be golf, archery, diving, weightlifting, these sorts of sports. Secondly, coactive sports are sports in which competitors perform simultaneously, but also independently, without direct interaction or interference among competitors. Examples of this are the classic running, swimming, cycling. And then finally we have the most popular category of sport, being interactive sports. Now these are sports where you also perform simultaneously, but you can directly influence and impact your opponent's performance. Examples of this are tennis, boxing, basketball, football, and many, many more. Okay, so this is great, brilliant, very interesting, but it's just an arbitrary classification. You could classify sports 1,000 different ways. Team sports and individual sports, sports with weight classes and open sports, sports that use an external instrument like hockey or tennis or golf, or sports where it's just the human. So why is this particular classification of sport any more deserving than any other? Well, this is where the need for a definition emerges, because basing and anchoring your work to a solid foundation is the only way to determine if whatever conclusions or insights ultimately emerge are interesting or just complete bollocks. In our case, it'll probably be the latter, so you've been warned. So okay then, let's hear this definition for sport then, shall we? Sport is the objective measure of skill through physical exertion in a competitive context. And you might rightly be saying to yourself, who are you to conjure up your own definition for sport? Of course it's going to support your own ideas. Okay, fine, that's completely valid. So let's just look and compare it to the official definition for sport, which also happens to be the first one that comes up on Google. Now, according to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, sport is defined as an activity involving physical exertion and skill that is governed by a set of rules or customs and often undertaken competitively. Now, I hope you can already see the clear similarities, but I'll add that I prefer mine. The official one is one of these modern woke definitions, and mine is just cleaner and simpler and better in every way. So with that cleared up, let's look more closely at the definition itself, because we can isolate the three key parameters which contribute to the definition of sport, those being skill, physical exertion, and competition. Now, to me, it seems reasonable to suggest that for an activity to be considered a sport, it must feature, at least to some extent, in all three of these categories. In fact, I believe it's even possible to measure and rate any given sport according to these three categories. So for example, gymnastics. It's probably the most technical sport that exists. So I would give it a strong 10 for skill, then maybe a 6 for physical exertion, and a 6 for competition. On the other hand, a sport like fencing, for instance, might look something like this. 8 for skill, 6 for physical exertion, and 10 for competition. Now, equally, we can also use this framework to decide what isn't a sport, because there has been a perhaps small but vocal contingent of supporters advocating for the inclusion of sports like chess in the Olympics. Now, I'm not here to say whether it should or shouldn't be in the Olympics, but what I can tell you is that while I would give chess remarkably high scores for competition and possibly even skill, unfortunately I can't give it any more than a 0 for physicality. Now, if you're looking at these scores in outrage because of how wrong I am, then you're going to have to stay outraged a little bit longer, because I'm not going to explain, justify, or defend my reasoning in this introductory video. But you are welcome to watch the rest of the series, where I will explain how I have the audacity to come up with these blasphemous scores. Okay, so let's wrap this up and tie everything together by revisiting the three types of sport I mentioned earlier: turn-based, coactive, and interactive. If we recall the definitions, just like in the definition for sport, we can also isolate the core elements of the definition, those being simultaneousness, or not simultaneousness, and interactivity, or not interactivity. From here, we can easily create a simple matrix to visualize the three types of sport, with synchronicity on one axis and interactivity on the other, and finally we populate each segment with the previously calculated sports and look for clues to see what these sports have in common and what distinguishes them, and then derive some conclusions. Wait, hang on a minute.